It's really about how, as an organization, we can use the power of AI and predictive technology to move our business forward. And when we get to that altitude, we'll start to, I think, see CMOs really understanding the value of that investment because it's fundamentally changing the impact of everything we do in marketing, not single channel.
In an ever-changing world that's all about staying connected, building connections, and seeing where the next collaboration takes a marketing campaign. From an initial brief to the follow-through, what paths are going to make a campaign success more than a possibility? Hi, I'm Brett Marchand, CEO of Plus Company. This is Partners in Possibility. AI is everywhere, but we, in the marketing world, are only scratching the surface of what is possible. We've seen the public at large test out new generative AI tools like ChatGPT and Dall-E to more niche products that use predictive AI to do all kinds of things. Now we're seeing marketers experimenting and ideating as they start building out new campaigns for their brands. In this episode, I'm joined by Oliver von Wersch, a partner at Statista, and Crystalyn Stuart-Loayza, the Chief Digital Officer at Citizen Relations and Mekanism. They're talking about a comprehensive survey of 200 CMOs on artificial intelligence, marketing measurement, and the marketing department of the future. Speaking of AI, I think the finding was that 43% of marketers understood and saw benefits in AI, which means, I guess, 57% don't. So what's going on there, Oliver? Maybe talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, but it's the same would happen, I think, if you would ask questions about advertising identifiers and first-party data sets, because everybody knows that it's needed. That's the case for AI as well. Everybody knows that you should experiment and you should AI tools in your organization by means of campaign effectiveness, attribution, measurement, reporting, and so on. But you still have the alternative. Right, it's still there, and it's the tech stack and the setup is running and has been running for years and years successfully, so maybe some things just have to happen and to make you react in the end.
What do you see as the challenges in implementing AI as part of their plans?
Things that are more easy than others. So using AI, for example, creative generation or creative personalization is a relatively easy task. You can implement that isolated or standalone into your tool sets and into your processes. If it comes to multi-channel or multi-point attribution, that's a different story, right? Because you have to attribute and to evaluate all the different attribution points, which are analog, which are digital with cookies, which are in-app or CTV and so on. And to just say like, hey, let's throw this all away, or in my thoughts, throw it away and put AI instead, that is a huge process. So, for example, also one point we found was that the CMOs are hesitant to hand over the spending distribution over channels to the AI, which is like the holy gray of the operative media planning, as we know. Yeah. So that's completely understandable, right? So if I still have the alternative, if I still have the systems and the teams up and running who would do it in that way right now, I don't simply press the button to switch it.
And probably a feeling of lack of control too, right? I mean, because marketers and agencies, by the way, want to have a clear say in what they're going to do, what channels they're going to use, what creative they're going to use, what's going to work and what's not going to work. And the idea that you've got a AI bot or model that's actually telling you what's working and not working, it's a little bit scary for some, I presume.
I'm a chess player. And many AI developments, also from DeepMind, which has been acquired by Google. Many development companies in this space started with chess programming. And the thing is, once the algorithm has solved chess, it's unbeatable, right? No human can ever beat a computer. in daily in the daily mode, even not the world champion. Maybe it's a bit comparable here. If you hand over your campaign attribution, if you hand over your spending distribution over channels to the AI, it's on the one hand unbeatable, but on the other hand, it changes the entire organization. And there, I think it's also somehow justified to be a bit hesitant. You shouldn't be too hesitant, and you should, of course, test, and you should develop test cases with your partners.
What are you hearing, Crystalyn, about how marketers are feeling about using AI? I mean, I presume there's different cohorts across your client set when it comes to utilizing it.
Yeah, I thought, some of the inputs from the way the CMOs responded to this survey were interesting, but also aligned with what we're seeing kind of in on the ground real world scenarios. I think we're on sort of a traditional transformation trajectory where some of like our more early adopters are being more comfortable with testing and bringing more parts of their business from creative, which is usually the easiest, through to more day-to-day workflows and into much more complex decisions on how they're managing their overall business. But I think what we're seeing as we look at that traditional sort of curve of adoption is there are factors of fear that certainly come into play. But there's also factors of leadership and the need for leaders to be bought in and brought along. There's a need for legal and regulatory teams at our largest scale companies to be brought along in the process, both to minimize risk, but also to forecast challenges, especially with some of the technology still being fairly unstable. And I do think that the prioritization of the investment is still an important factor for CMOs. Many of them have so many opportunities for where they could integrate AI into their mix, but understanding where to spend and at what scale seems to be a significant contributor to, or a barrier to why many have yet to actually action the way we know the technology is capable of supporting them.
Yeah. Speaking of creative, you both mentioned it, both that marketers are using it for creative optimization and generation. You also talked about it, Crystalyn, just now. I also thought it was really interesting that I think 53% of marketers said that they actually see more creative roles with AI versus less, which on the surface seems counterintuitive. So,
yeah, this is kind of everything that gets automatized frees resources, right? So if you look to philosophers in the 19th century, it was about industrialization and what the industrialization could like unlock potential and time of people for creative, for painting and playing music and so on. It was the same with digitization, and it's the same with, I guess, AI, distribution of AI. It's the next revolution, and it is binding resources when you are implementing it, but in the end, it is unlocking your personal resources, because in the end, humans will have more time for other things, and those things likely could be creation, right, and ideation.
Crystalyn, you've talked about the democratization of creativity with AI to me in the past. Maybe just talk a little bit about what you mean by that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're sort of seeing as part of the one of the best upsides of AI in creative is the democratization and the ability for a number of different team members to enable new forms of creativity, whether that be able to produce higher volumes of content at scale, to be able to rapidly spec or prototype content without having to have a long course in Photoshop, being able to generate images like inside of PowerPoint decks with ease. Everybody is capable of really supercharging their own creative powers. But I do think the stat around 53% expect an increase in creative roles is probably also reflective of a shift in the types of creative roles that we'll probably see in the future. As we connect more data and more insights around consumer into our creative process, we'll probably start to see the rise of kind of a new class of creatives, those who not only understand design systems that help us activate a visual ID across a lot of platforms in AI, but also those who understand a bit more of the analytical bridge with creative and can make more adjustments to the way they're thinking about both messaging and creative pairings. And we see that trajectory anyways, as we see an increase in personalization and the desire to have more personalized content as part of what we offer beyond the 60-second spot and the big production element. So a new breed of creative class, I think, is certainly emerging. And it's a really exciting time, I think, to be a creative.
And presumably you can test ideas really quickly with AI too, right? In minutes, and instead of waiting to do a focus group and waiting to put it in a creative assessment survey or research, and that, I mean, it's got to be powerful for creative people if you think about it, being able to go to, whether you're internally in marketing and going to the rest of the organization, or you're an agency going to the marketer, to be able to say, listen, we know this is going to work.
Well, between what we know in retrospect about how programs have performed and also the predictive capabilities of AI, we're able to get a lot more inputs into the way we shape our creative. So between the ability to have better insights on past performance and how consumers are responding to creative, and also the predictive capabilities of AI, we're starting to see this sort of emerging capability of creatives as analysts able to intake data and work with AI to help generate stronger messaging and stronger design, which I think is going to be unleashing kind of a new breed of creative analyst, which is very exciting.
What else in the survey, did you find interesting or unexpected?
Yeah, it is like the kind of implementation of artificial intelligence on different levels. That was the most interesting thing. So that the marketers basically said, yes, it is relevant. Yes, we are experimenting. Yes, we are using it for certain topics. But no, we are not in place right now. We feel not in place right now to have an integrated strategy to implement AI into our companies, which is, and if I compare that again to the media companies we have talked to, it's the same impression there. There are kind of a few leaders in strategic implementation. And also here we found leaders in strategic implementation who have a full scope, who are investing in all possible AI use cases. But the majority of companies were hesitant, experimenting, yes, and also aware of the strategic relevance and the long-term relevance, but experimenting in a limited playing field. And that's the most interesting question, is how does this evolve over time, right? So when do you get the full scope into your plans, and who will be the first, right? So if one FMCG would be the first in fully implementing it everywhere, there will be followers, and they and the competitors will then act more quickly, like in any other kind of development in the internet, right? If you have a first mover, then the first mover has a competitive advantage.
Crystalyn, anything you found particularly interesting in there that we haven't talked about?
I think it's really interesting that we saw in the survey results that a number of CMOs felt comfortable leveraging creative innovation in AI as part of kind of the play and unleashing creativity. And some have started to look at ways to use AI as a part of their reporting process and maybe lightly into attribution. I think the big middle ground that really will unleash AI at scale is as many of our CMOs begin to leverage AI for day-to-day workflow automation. There's been huge movement in the last several months around releases of AI features inside of our primary tech platforms, Google's Gemini, Meta Llama 3, a lot of OpenAI's GPT advancements, and they're even bigger and bigger and bigger announcements that happen each month. But once we start to see some of that work take place in automating our day-to-day workflows, then I think CMOs can start to move towards more transformative uses of AI. So I think we're getting into a time frame where automation is going to be an important use for AI, but next will be transformative motions, doing things differently than we may have done them in the past. And we all know that that takes time for big organizations, not just to automate, but then to transform the way they plan, the way they measure, the way they optimize, the way they reimagine a relationship with customers. And that will take time and operational shifts.
Yeah, one interesting thing I found is how, if you look at the cookieless era, which comes nearer, measurement is definitely an issue, right? So it's already now it's an issue with all the channels and all the different availability of cookies and IDs and apps and services and so on. But it will be a big issue, so that some people in the industry started talking about probabilistic measurement, right? So you guess, which means which is like the fallback in analog media categories. And that's interesting because that has to be done, and that is crucial, because if you can't measure, you don't know about your campaign success, and then it's then a few things are messed up.
Yeah. In a former podcast, we talked to Avi Goldfarb, who wrote a book which is all about how AI is fundamentally about prediction, and therefore you would think that one of the fundamental ways it's being used is in measurement. So I think it's very insightful. It's one of the reasons we fundamentally put measurement and predictive measurement at the foundation of AOS, because I think I and others thought that, if you're using AI to generate new creative, et cetera, it might make you a little bit more efficient. But if you don't know whether it's working or not, who cares?
It's fair. It's a fair point. I think part of what the challenge around measurement has been historically is that we're still looking at measurement in silos. And so the return on an investment in a new measurement strategy might only be as good as which channels you can apply that predictive insight to. So part of what we're trying to I think evolve mindsets around our CMOs is that first we have to sort of integrate all of the different data sources that we're using to look at our holistic approach to marketing. We have to think about an integrated measurement model. We have to leverage integrated audience segments that we're all optimizing around. And we have to set universal KPIs. And if we do that well at the beginning, at the onset, at the strategic layer, then the investment in a platform that allows us to reimagine measurement and predict measurement becomes much more effective than just optimizing return on ad spend or specific channel adjustments and programmatic. It's really about how, as an organization, we can use the power of AI and predictive technology to move our business forward. And when we get to that altitude, we'll start to, I think, see CMOs really understanding the value of that investment. Because it's fundamentally changing the impact of everything we do in marketing, not single channel.
Yeah, and change management around it, it's going to be massive, right? Like massive.
Yeah.
Speaking about the sort of core opportunities in the future, maybe the most important one when we talk about sort of system change and the impact of AI is what the actual marketing department and marketing jobs are going to look like in the future. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that it's there's a lot of different analogies used to talk about, sort of the way that AI is going to catapult us into a new era of marketing. I think back myself to the various kind of decades of the web. I mean, when we moved from radio to TV, when the sort of .com era, the way social profoundly changed our ways of working, the influencer bubble, we've seen some of these kind of ebbs and flows in channel historically. And we know that each one of those profoundly changed the way we market. I mean, profoundly changed the way we build strategies, the mix of things we do. But those were essentially channel changes largely. I think what's so interesting about AI is it is a systems level change. It is fundamentally augmenting human intelligence in a way that is going to affect every channel that we leverage and have an effect on each of those parts of the mix. And so I think what is likely to happen is, because of the profoundness and the scale of how AI can impact our day-to-day work, it would seem that we would go faster towards AI integration as part of everything we do. But in fact, I think we are seeing that there's a huge learning curve, and it's probably going to take some time for the most of our sort of majority, our later majority, to actually really comfortably change their ways of working. I say that from our vantage point, working with clients, it's going to take time for client organizations to ready themselves. But with all of that said, the immediate near-term effects that I think will take place are definitely going to be around automation. They're going to be around evolving the way we plan, measure, and optimize as one of the first orders of business. And they're certainly going to be around creating and up-leveling our talent to function more like systems engineers. And I know our chief data officer, Michael Cohen, uses that term regularly, that we're moving towards a time where we can engineer technology to help us solve any number of problems in our day-to-day, thus creating kind of this generalist practitioner that we think is probably going to represent the future skills of our team. So we're already starting to build towards that capability using technology and machine learning to help us solve challenges across channel.
Oliver, what do you think is going to be the impact to marketing, marketers in the future?
Two very plastical or like two images. So first, working less with spreadsheets in daily work, right? So not using spreadsheets anymore for various reportings, for planning, for like my manager was once a report on the performance in the last week of the channel. So that is taken away and that is solved, and that unlocks time for humans and agencies and on the advertiser side, because they get rid of boring activities and they can focus on more creative activities or have an extra day off. I don't know. Secondly, we will be able to digest and process more data than right now. And that is also giving freedom to the future organization, because processing power, of course, will be an issue, and energy consumption will also be an issue. But in theory, you are able to process more data to drive better decisions. So that is also on the positive side. By the way, one next study I would love to see or to make is the study on how AI-generated ads are perceived by consumers, because we shouldn't make it too easy and say, like, here is our personalization made by an algorithm. We just play it out, and if one ad clicks better than the other, then it's the better performance. There will be perception of consumers towards AI-generated content and AI-generated ads, and this might be multidimensional. So it's not only clicking it, but it's also a perception of the advertiser that does it, and that's interesting. Consumers and normal people love to play around with Mid-Journey and so on, but sometimes Mid-Journey results are frightening, and so could AI-generated ads be. So that's also one interesting piece of research which has to be executed, I guess.
Well, Oliver, that sounds like a fascinating research study. I think we're talking to Statista about a study on AI and creative in the market and measuring its effectiveness. So it sounds like we'll have that study together. One last question, Crystalyn. Chance to give us a plug, because I know you're working on some really interesting territory around responsive AI, and how that can both help your teams but also clients in the end. Maybe talk a little bit about what you're building there.
Yeah, one of the important ways that we've been working internally to leverage AI in our day-to-day is by thinking about tasks that we couldn't have previously done because they were either too manual or required too many data sources that were disparate, that we can now accomplish. And for example, one of the products that we've had in R&D for the last 6 months is called responsive content. And it actually allows us to do something we've always wanted to do, which is listen to what's happening in the news media, in social, in search, in reviews, in forums, and immediately synthesize all of that information into a topical brief that is on brand for a brand's area of interest and expertise and concern, and turn that into daily, weekly, or monthly content concepts and briefs, along with generative content samples, so that brands or individual executive thought leaders or smaller size brands who couldn't work to produce high volumes of content in the past could really have access to this development of content at the speed of culture. And what's cool about a platform like this is that it isn't one of these back-end dashboards that you have to get in and manage yourself daily. It just sends you an email digest of all of the on-topic content that you could be publishing during a really relevant period in culture. And so we love the idea that AI is really empowering us to be able to do things we could never have done before in ways that our clients can really find value.
So if let's say I'm the Adidas client, which Adidas is our client, as you know, and it's during the Euro, and I could now, based on what's being discussed and what's in the news in real time, it would send me and obviously Adidas sells lots of shoes for football. They send me a list of topics that the brand should talk about and actually generate the content as well. And that would be on brand.
Yeah, it'll do even better. Yeah. It can generate blog posts. It can generate social copy with images that can then be used by humans to adapt. It can generate any range of content types. And really the power in doing this is that not only does it give you on-brand examples of that content that are really designed to look, feel in the tone of the brand, but it also helps to synthesize the real role that the brand could play in that topical conversation because we train it to do that.
I got to use this to promote Partners in Possibility.
Sounds good.
Well, listen, this has been a fascinating discussion. There's so much around this topic. And as you say, it's sophisticated, it's complicated, but it's the future. So I really appreciate your insights into this topic. So thank you, Oliver. Thank you, Crystalyn. And thank you for being Partners in Possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Oliver von Wersch, a partner at Statista, and Crystalyn Stuart-Loayza, Chief Digital Officer at Citizen Relations and Mekanism. While there's no way to know exactly what the future of automation and AI for marketing will be, CMOs and marketers will have to adapt to it. I'm your host, Brett Marchand, and this is Partners in Possibility.